So first of all, hi Lieutenant Glossman, nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you.
I'm super glad to have this opportunity to talk with someone in your position, and thank you for helping me with my project. A little bit about myself, I've probably already been over this, but my name is Nikita Guhan. I'm currently a high school student working on a Gold Award project for Girl Scouts, and in this project I aim to advocate for a fairer and safer police response to behavioral health and developmental disability crisis. So, Ms. Glossman, please tell me a little bit more about yourself, like your educational background, job title, the different roles you have as both commander of the Crisis Negotiations Unit and the Critical Incident Stress Management Team, and how long you've been doing this.
Well, absolutely. Well, I first of all, thank you for coming in. I'm kind of glad that the stars have aligned and you have found me and I have found you and you're here today and before Thanksgiving and I've been given the opportunity to speak with you. So thank you for that. A little bit about myself. I'm a Jacksonvilleonian, born and raised here in Jacksonville.
Same.
51 years ago. Graduated from Wolfson High School, 1988, and went away to college, Florida State, for a year. Realized if I wanted to graduate, I better come back and buckle down. So I am 1993 graduated the University of North Florida. That old adage, "You never finish at UNF," is not true. I did. I got a bachelor's degree in history. I changed my major 1 year before I graduated, and realized I didn't like the administrative classes of criminology. But history I loved. I have since gone back and gotten a master's degree in criminology since being employed with the Sheriff's Office. And love learning. I tell my teams and my officers, if you don't learn one new thing every day, you're doing yourself, your family, and your community a disservice. So it's one of my pet peeves. My current job title, actually I have several of them. My current job title right at this particular moment is a lieutenant with the Jacksonville Sheriff's Office. Right this second, I am holding that position in Patrol Zone 3, which is the south side of town, and encompasses Mandarin, San Marco, Miramar, the beaches, that kind of area. We have a mutual agreement with the beaches. In addition to that, I am the unit commander, as you mentioned, with the Crisis Negotiation Unit, which are the old hostage negotiators. In addition to that, my third full-time job, I like to say, is I'm the team coordinator, also commander, but coordinator of the Critical Incident Stress Management Team, and that is a ad hoc group of employees that are on call and go out anytime an employee of the Sheriff's Office is involved in a critical incident. And I think you asked a little bit more about that later on in the interview, so I'll wait to go over that. What else did you ask? How long have I been doing both of these? So I've been with the Sheriff's Office 27 and a half years. I've held the title of Commander of the Crisis Negotiation Unit, as well as we call it CISM, CISM. I've held both of those leadership roles. October was 4 years. So very busy. I call myself, say I have 3 full-time jobs. In addition to a couple other projects I'm working on, a peer support team and an officer wellness project. So very busy.
Oh my God, yeah. High positions too.
Yeah.
So I'm gonna get started with my questions now.
Okay.
And feel free to interrupt me anytime if you want to add or correct anything, or if you don't feel comfortable answering something. So to start off, I'm gonna ask a few questions regarding the training received by those in a crisis negotiations unit. So yeah, I'm gonna ask a few questions regarding the training received by those in a crisis negotiations unit or by members of a crisis intervention team. And from what I know, in Duval County, you can request a crisis intervention team member to respond to a crisis, but the Jacksonville Sheriff's Office also has a crisis negotiations unit, of which you are commander of. And can you explain the difference between a crisis intervention team, or CIT, and a crisis negotiations unit, or CNU?
Sure. So a CIT officer, it's not a team per se. Every officer that comes out of the academy now is CIT trained,
Okay.
meaning they have a 40-hour block of instruction about mental health and how to deal with mental health individuals on the street. They get a kind of a bird's eye view of mental health in the classroom, and in addition to that, they actually go out into the field, and I believe they visit mental health facilities with instructors that actually work in the mental health field. I went through it when then Director Rutherford, who is now Congressman Rutherford, who was in between then Sheriff Rutherford, was the director of the jail, and he was instrumental in starting the CIT program. And we were one of the first classes that went through that. As part of the negotiator team, we did that. So things may have evolved since then. That's kind of the crux to the CIT unit, so to speak. Every recruit that comes out of the academy has this training. It's a basic mental health training. The difference between that and my negotiator unit, as you see the CNU logo behind me on the flag, is that we are a specialized unit of officers and detectives that are called when the police need the police. In other words, when patrol officers or other specialized units such as SWAT cannot handle an incident on the street, say a subject has barricaded themselves who is wanted, or a victim has barricaded themselves and are threatening self-harm, and they have actual hostages inside, and the forms of communication have broken down, then the on-scene watch commander, which would be a lieutenant, calls the SWAT commander. They have a conversation, and they determine that a SWAT call-out needs to be born, so to speak, be initiated, and the SWAT team and the negotiator teams come out, and a SWAT call-out is born, like I say, and so we go out together. Very, very, very infrequently one team being deployed without the other. We both do very different things, but we work very closely in conjunction with one another. So my negotiators have a very special communication skill set, as well as an investigative skill set that CIT officers do not. CIT has a 40-hour kind of appetizer view of mental health ideas and how to deal with mental health problems and issues, whereas my negotiators train bi-weekly with a clinician, and so we train 24 times a year, and plus call-outs, which average 15 to 20 a year, so we are constantly evolving in our training and classes and things like that. So we get a lot more training than CIT officers do. So that's why it's a specialized unit. Ad hoc meaning we have cursory jobs first. Obviously my first job, my real job, my real career is patrol unit, patrol lieutenant, watch commander. But when it used to be a pager, now it's a phone, but when the phone goes off, there's a SWAT call out, I drop my patrol duties and I go do negotiator duties. So everybody on my negotiator team has primary duties first, whether they're homicide detectives or missing person detectives or they're patrol officers, same thing. They have primary duties first, and they're on call for negotiator.
Got it. So I don't know if I mentioned this in the questions, but is this done like voluntarily? Do officers like volunteer to?
Yes.
Okay, got it.
Yes. So they have to want to come on the team. Now they're compensated to be on call, but they have to want to be on the team. They have to try out, and they have to interview.
Okay, cool.
So yes.
Yeah,
and it's a big commitment because you're on call a month at a time, every other month, and away from your family during holidays and weekends and in the most inopportune times. just like law enforcement work is, you know, there are guys working tomorrow during Thanksgiving.
Yeah.
So it's a calling.
Mm-hmm. And again, I don't know if I mentioned this in the questions, but is this something that's like specific to Jacksonville, or does every like police department have a separate unit?
The big police agencies have specialized units, such as the negotiator teams. Some call them hostage negotiator teams. Some call them crisis negotiator units. Some call them crisis negotiator teams. They're all kind of similar. Some of the smaller agencies do not. So, for example, Nassau County has a smaller team. We have mutual aid agreements with smaller agencies like the beaches. Atlantic Beach has a very small team, so if something major happens out there, we would go out and assist them.
Got it.
So same thing with adjoining agencies, so which is kind of cool, and it's the same throughout the nation.
Yeah.
So
yeah, it's also like cool how you mentioned they like meet often to like update the training. That's not something I knew. So
yeah, it's really neat. I've actually traveled and I've taught all over the country negotiator blocks, and it's different all over the country. So some are really, really good and some are not. There are some that don't have any. So we're very fortunate. Jacksonville is top tier when it comes to trainings and sending our personnel for the newest and the brightest and the up and coming. They're willing to try new things, and whatever's better for the community, they're willing to do. So we're honored in Northeast Florida to have an administration that is willing to be as open as ours is, because they don't hesitate to do what's best for the community. You know,
Yeah.
I mean, not many agencies, or not a lot of agencies are like that. Some just, nope, this is the way it's going to be, and it's our way or the highway. And Jacksonville Sheriff's Office is not like that. If we say, look, why don't we try it this way, you know, or there's this training out there, it's working for ABC department in, you know, Idaho, for example. I'm just coming up with an agency. Let's try it. Let's see. And hey, let's send a couple people, or let's bring the instructor here and let's see what they're all about. And it may work here. So why not? If it's better for the community, then yeah, let's do it. So we're very fortunate.
Yeah, that's great to hear. So you sort of mentioned how the qualifications and training for a CIT officer and like CNU member is like very different. So does the training for a crisis intervention team member involve education on a broad range of mental illness? And is that the same for training for members of CNUs?
So I went through CIT training, oh my gosh, it's probably been at least 12 years ago. I cannot honestly tell you how it has changed, if it's evolved. I don't know what the curriculum is now, so I can't answer that. CNU, yes, we talk about the DSM, the mental health book. We talk about, you know, we always have, not always, I shouldn't say that. We have new negotiators every so often, so we are constantly revisiting the mental health diagnoses. We're talking about all the different signs and symptoms that we may experience, not only on the street, but on call-outs. You know, what this symptom or sign may lead to, because that could help us better communicate with an individual in crisis. So the goal, obviously, is to get the individual out safely if we're on a SWAT call out, and that's what a CNU person is there to do. If the crisis negotiation unit is there, it's because there is a SWAT call out that is being worked. So, but at the same time, the techniques that we do use actually work across the board. So it will also work in our everyday careers, in our everyday lives with your families. You know, we're using active listening. So let's communicate is all we're doing. And that's what we teach our negotiators, is that all you're doing is carrying on a conversation. You know,
Yeah.
the mental health, the person that is in crisis may not think their brain is not firing like you and I's necessarily is. So we may have to go about the conversation a little bit differently, but we're still carrying on the conversation.
Yeah.
So we're building rapport, we're coming to a successful resolution, and then we're getting them the help that they need to not necessarily fix their problem, because I'm not sure there is a fix, but there's at least for us a Band-Aid for it, until we can get them to the right help, because we don't have a bunch of letters behind our name that can fix their problem. So.
Yeah, so you did mention there's like a broad range of mental health issues that are covered in CNU training, but are there like specific mental health issues that are more focused on, and if so, can you explain the thought process behind the decision to like focus on those particular mental illnesses?
Okay, I'm sorry, say that again?
Yeah, you're good. Are there specific mental health issues that are like focused on and covered more in depth in CNU training? And if so, what's like the thought process behind the decision to focus on them?
No, we cover them all.
Okay, got it.
There's not one in particular, because we see them all on call outs.
True, yeah.
So there's not, we don't see more individuals with bipolar or schizophrenia than we do with anxiety.
Got it.
So, no, we cover every aspect.
Okay. So, as part of education on mental illness, are future CNU officers given specific characteristics of a person with a certain mental illness that would help recognize and identify them?
So the training we do, yes, we, like I mentioned, we train monthly with a clinician who is absolutely amazing, has her own practice. She comes in so we have, like I said, 2 trainings a month. She comes in our first training day of the month, and she provides a 4-hour block of mental health training and just refreshes our mind and our brains on what signs and symptoms that allow us to recognize different diagnoses. Now, of course, we don't have PhDs behind our names, and we're not meant to be able to diagnose an individual illness per se. But with training and experience comes the ability to say, you know what, they may have this.
Right.
If it is, then we probably should go about speaking to them this way. And let me give you an example about that. We had a prior clinician who we had 2 call outs in one night, back to back. We went all night long, and we had a guy an older man who pointed a gun at his adult son in the house, and the son ran out, called the police, and he says, my dad's been acting strange. He's paranoid. He's always thinking people are after him. He's got barricaded doors and stuff. He's got booby traps in the house, and it's weird. He gets up in the morning, he's got a routine every morning. He gets up, he goes and gets his paper, and he says the paper is facing one weird way on the driveway, and so he's thinking that people are bugging the paper because it's not facing a certain way, and it's weird. So we called him all night long, and he wouldn't answer. And finally we called the clinician, and we're like, what is, the son says he's not like this. Normally he answers and he talks, and she said he's probably suffering from sundowners. She said as soon as that sun comes up, he's going to answer, and he's either going to answer, or the son says when the sun comes up, he's going to go out and get his paper, and he'll be able to communicate. And sure enough, the sun came up. SWAT team saw him inside his house, got up, put his robe on. SWAT team saw him inside making coffee. A few minutes later, he came outside into the driveway, got his paper. They were able, from a safe distance, the SWAT guys, to engage him in conversation and took him into custody. So that's how we use clinicians. So they were able to utilize intelligence from the son
Mm-hmm.
and the signs and symptoms of what the victim had shown the family and what we learned from gathering intelligence, to not diagnose, because that's not why we're there,
Mm-hmm.
but to kind of lead us down a path of least resistance, so to
Mm-hmm.
speak, and at least we think this is what he's suffering from, so we're not going to throw gas in, we're not going to force him out, we're just going to wait him out because it's what's best for the victim. So, and that's what we did, and it was successful. So that's how we utilize our clinicians, that's how we utilize the training and the tools that we learn through mental health training, and we know that certain diagnoses, if we throw gas in, it will be worse.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why we do training, because we don't want to do that.
Got it.
So we can't just gas everybody out.
Yeah.
That's not how it works. So that's why we keep training.
Okay.
So
So as part of CNU training, are there interactions with individuals with mental illness? I think you mentioned you do visit certain facilities to provide firsthand experience.
in CIT, yes, they do that
Okay.
in CIT. In CNU, not so much. We get a lot of it on call-outs.
Mm-hmm.
We have not done that on the negotiator side of things.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Okay.
but on CIT, yes,
Got
mainly because the patrol officers really have never handled or have never dealt with individuals with mental illness in a controlled environment.
Mm-hmm.
Now they handle it on the street, but that's not in a controlled environment.
True.
Those are individuals in crisis. So in a classroom setting, and I'll give you a quick example. When I went through CIT, we had a panel set up in the front of the classroom at the end of the 40 hours. And these were civilians that were in the class with us. And we just thought they were in the class with us. Unbeknownst to us, they were civilians who were also diagnosed as mentally ill.
Mm-hmm.
Because they took their medication, they functioned as, and I'll use air quotes, normal.
Yeah.
And I know that's not a
Yeah.
the correct term, but you would never know that they were diagnosed with a mental
Mhm.
illness. But in CIT training, the curriculum allows to take the students, the officers, into a mental health environment that is controlled and show them what victims are like in a controlled environment, so that they are better able to adapt and speak with them, deal with them, in a non-controlled environment on the street. So, but like I said, we don't necessarily do that in CNU training, negotiating training.
So the training of a member of a crisis negotiations unit involves learning advanced communication skills to deal with an individual with a mental illness. Are there specific communication skills for different types of mental illness, or is there just like more so a general way of dealing with individuals with any mental illness?
So active listening is a big one. There is different ways of dealing with different mental illness. I'm hesitant to give out our tactics.
No, not asking for specifics.
It's kind of like a magician giving away their secrets.
Yeah.
So I'm hesitant to answer that question.
But there are.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, a little bit.
Got it.
A little bit.
So now I'm gonna be moving on to asking a few questions regarding how your crisis negotiations unit operates and some of the procedures and measures you guys use when responding to a crisis. So a crisis negotiations unit is typically a special unit within a sheriff's office that is called upon to help in a crisis. And I think you already went over this, but to reiterate, how does a crisis negotiations unit of which you are commander of function? Like, do officers call you guys when they think it's appropriate?
So what happens is an incident happens, a crisis happens, either the family or a witness or someone in the street calls the police. Receiving gets the call in the comm center. They send it to a dispatcher on a zone. The zone sends it to the street, and then we get it over the radio, and then usually 2 units or 3 or 4, depending how big the call is, go to the call. Once they go to the call, they determine what they have, and this is what it looks like. These are different calls. These are active calls. These are pending calls. These are units that are on different calls here. So I don't see anything working that would look like it could be something major. I'll pull this one up and show you. So they get a call. This is a dispute, and then here, business versus guest refusing to leave. Meet the complainant at the front desk. So it gives the officers, and there's 2 units going. It gives the officers an additional information of what's happening. So I don't see a mental illness call, which is 27 is the signal. So 2 units go. Let's say, for example, we have a barricaded subject who is, let's say, firing shots outside, because we've had that in Mandarin. I've seen more than 2 units would go. A sergeant would then go. If I hear it, obviously I would immediately go. Not if I would hear it, I would immediately go. But let's just say, for some reason, I don't hear it. But a sergeant would go. Sergeant would get there, assess what they have. They would realize this is obviously a major danger to the public. This guy is firing shots outside his residence. He is in extreme danger to the public. We need to evacuate the surrounding area. He's not just endangering himself. So that, if he's just in danger to himself, we don't put, it's not illegal, and this is horrible to think. It is not illegal to be a danger to yourself. If you're endangering others, then we have to intervene. So the Sheriff's Office has changed their policy recently in that if you're only a danger to yourself, we don't intervene. Even though the Baker Act says if you're a danger to yourself or others, we as law enforcement can go in and take you out of your residence and involuntarily commit you to a mental health facility. However, if you're in your own residence or even somebody else's residence and that other person is not there, so you are not a threat to them or they can get out, and you're only threatening yourself, we are not going to go in there and force your hand and have to either harm you or kill you to take you and put you in a mental health facility. So we've changed the way we do things. So for our example, this guy's shooting outside of his residence. He's a danger to the public. My sergeant will get there, quickly assess that, okay, this meets the criteria for a specialized unit who has specialized weapons. The SWAT team does. They have a big Bearcat, which is two big armored trucks. They have snipers, they have shields. We have a drone unit that can fly into the residence and kind of see what's going on. Negotiators. So once a SWAT call out happens, you activate a lot of, it's just not SWAT, it's SWAT, negotiators, drone unit, we can call it the bomb team, it's a lot of people. So a watch commander though, which is a lieutenant, has to be on scene and they have to make the call for SWAT. So I would go, I would say, yep, this definitely is beyond patrol's capabilities because we don't have all those tools and toys that SWAT has, drone units, that sort of thing. Nor do we have the resources, the personnel, block off the roadways, that sort of thing. We need traffic units. We need to obviously make sure everybody's safe. And I would make the call to the SWAT command, and I would say, this is what we have. We need you. And the SWAT commander, who's also a lieutenant, would then call the SWAT assistant chief, and in this circumstance, the SWAT assistant chief would say, yep, this is a go, we'll make a call out, and then we find a big command post to put like 80 vehicles, and it becomes a SWAT call out. SWAT call out is born, everybody comes, so then I switch hats. If it's my scene on the patrol side, I have to make somebody a lieutenant, a watch commander, because they have to handle the patrol side of things, and I become a negotiator commander.
Wow.
So it's crazy. And so then we work the negotiator side and try to get this guy out. So it's
got it.
it is mass chaos initially.
Yeah, sounds pretty organized from my viewpoint though.
It may look may look organized, and that's the goal, is for it
Yeah.
to look organized, but initially it is mass chaos. So it's fun. It's fun mass chaos.
Okay. So I think you already answered my next question, so
Okay.
I'm going to move on. An emphasis on internal characteristics of an individual rather than external factors in explaining their behavior is known as fundamental attribution error. And an example of this cognitive heuristic could be if a psychiatrist attributes aggression to internal processes within their patient rather than considering contextual factors, leading to an overestimation of the level of risk of the patient. So, since an individual may react in dramatic or emotional ways in a situation of high pressure, such as a crisis response, how do you and your team define the line between a normal emotional reaction and a mental health issue that warrants a different type of treatment?
So typically we gather intelligence, and we gather more intelligence, and we gather more intelligence. So it's like being involved, God forbid, in a robbery.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you go to a robbery scene and I interview you as the victim, and you had a gun pointed at you, God forbid. And you're freaking out because you had a gun pointed at you. Who wouldn't be, right? And then say I come back 30 minutes later, and finally your adrenaline is starting to seep. It's going okay. And I say, Nikita, take a deep breath for me and tell me again what happened. And slowly your brain is going, you're reliving the incident, and it's becoming more clear to you. So you're more, you're remembering more of the incident. So we go back and we interview again because the victim or the witness or the family could think of more things. In a crisis, typically individuals initially deal and talk to us based on emotion. And when you do that, things don't go very well. When we get them to calm down is the word, but it's not a great word. We get them to relax a little and take a deep breath and chill out and say, look, our goal here is not to hurt or kill anybody. That is not what the police do. We are here to help. We're here to get you to assistance. Once we get them to understand that, and we get more information to get us over that hump, then we get the information we need to best use the tactics that we're taught based on the mental health issue that they are diagnosed with, if they're diagnosed, to have a peaceful resolution. So the best way to do that is to interview, is to call physicians. Now you may think, well, how do you get information through physicians? You know, with HIPAA. If it's a life or death situation, Florida statute, there's a statute that allows us to get medical information that would not otherwise allow everyday Joe Schmo to do that. So, which is kind of cool.
Yeah.
Because
useful.
Yeah, absolutely. If it's life or death,
Yeah.
I mean, it's so, and we've used it before. It's like, it's a 115 something. I have it in my negotiator portfolio in the car, but it's and there are some physicians that don't know about it, and we've said, look, per Florida statute, yada 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 yada, and we've read it to them, and and it actually helps on the street because with a diagnosis, we can go, okay, well, they're diagnosed with this, so chief, we cannot throw gas in, because if we do that, he's a ticking time bomb, and
escalate
we are going to be here all night long. So I mean, it really helps. So that's what interviewing, finding family members. We have resources and databases that allow us to find family members in the military, across the other side of the nation. We've done that. We've called. We had a jumper at JU. I don't even think made the news a few months ago. It was almost a 24-hour call out. We were on this guy. This kid was on the top of a garage, an elevator shaft in the garage, and we were out there like 22 hours. And his family was in Nevada, I think, and Dad flew in. I mean, he had a lot of problems, but we get in contact with whoever we can find, and we have a lot of really good negotiators who work in investigations. So they can find a needle in a haystack, literally. So that's what we do, and it helps. So that's. If it helps the victim and the victim's family, then that's what we're going to do. If it takes 22 hours, that's what we're going to do. So.
Okay, so my next question might be kind of like basic, but an important part of a crisis negotiations unit is obtaining background information about and a psychological profile of an individual. So in a crisis response, is this done after first mitigating a situation? And what specific measures and procedures are used when establishing a psychological profile of an individual?
So it's kind of done simultaneously. So the SWAT team really mitigates. That's their job. We are gathering intelligence through the psychological profile, so to speak. So it's kind of done at the same time. We are always gathering intelligence, and even though we may have everything we think we need, we still go back later on, and we may call the family again. If we can't get them to the scene, or we may go back and re-interview them again, even at the scene. They may be on the other side of town, or even in another, they could be in Orlando, and we could say, if you're, can you come up? It may help for us to say, hey, look, Mom is right here. She came from Orlando because she cares about you. And Billy is saying, Mom hates me. Well, if she hates you, she wouldn't have driven up from Miami. We've had that before too. So that helps. We can mitigate through words, but SWAT typically does that with the physical. Setting a perimeter, patrol does the best they can initially. If you don't have a perimeter set, you can't negotiate. If the guy gets out of the perimeter, you can't negotiate. So obviously we need that done prior, but SWAT really does that part. We do the psychological part.
So you mentioned how you guys can sometimes call physicians and stuff to help in really establishing a recognition of a illness for someone. So is this psychological profile established by members of the crisis negotiations unit, or are mental and behavioral health experts used to do so?
My team does it.
Okay.
Yeah, very rarely do we use physicians. I mean, if we have to, sometimes, actually most of the time, I shouldn't say most, I would say 75% of the time somebody's not diagnosed with an illness. And we know they probably should be, or they should be. But we usually don't have to call a physician for information. I could probably count on one hand how many times we've done that. And I've been on the team January will be 23 years.
Got it. So does your crisis negotiations unit have any ties or relationships with any mental health services, or do you guys act as independent service teams?
So the JSO has we have an external EAP program and emergency. We have a employee assistance program. It's Health Advocate, and so we coordinate with them for our CISM training. Our negotiator training goes through a clinician who owns her own practice. It's called Changing Perspectives. That's the name of her business. So we don't send people to her because she's private practice, but we do refer people to Health Advocate because the agency does coordinate. We have a contract with them. So yeah.
Okay. So some crisis negotiation units in certain counties, such as the Mecklenburg County, meet at a scheduled interval to refresh and update their training and discuss potential improvements with each other. So you already mentioned how you guys meet bi-weekly, but just to clarify, do you guys meet at scheduled times, and do you have any scheduled process for like updating training and stuff?
So I actually have a training coordinator. He's a sergeant, and he is absolutely amazing. So he reaches out to me and my other team leaders, and he says what do we think we should touch on. He also asks the team, is there any topics that we need to bring to the table? Is there anything we want to?
So it's like collaborative.
Absolutely.
That's good to hear.
Yeah, if somebody wants to learn more about one specific topic, more so than something else. We want to do team building. We'll do something like that. So it is a true team effort. It is not. I mean, at the end, obviously, I have to make a decision if it comes down to that. But it is a true team effort.
Okay. So when talking to the Rapid Response Team Assessor at Child Guidance Center, Joe Mella, I learned that a lot of the times when responders are called upon in a crisis, a background of an individual is already present, which indicates they have a mental illness. I think you mentioned like 35% of the time they have like a diagnosis. And for example, Mr. Mella even mentioned how the JSO is aware of the addresses of certain individuals with mental illnesses who have offended previously, and thus is conscious of this if any future cases with the individual arise. So now I'm going to ask about the specific measures and procedures in approaching or responding to individuals in a crisis response who are already identified to have a behavioral health issue. Okay, the assessment and management of the risk of a person with a mental illness is an important part in deciding the appropriate treatment for and handling of them. Do you and your team have any specific risk evaluation procedures or assessments that you conduct to determine the person's risk to themselves and others?
So when the negotiators are called out, there is an obvious risk. They meet a certain criteria that falls in under this meets criteria for a SWAT call out because patrol can no longer handle the situation. So they are already at that beyond patrol's capabilities. We have a checklist that we sometimes use that determines where they are or where they could be as in regard to what kind of risk or threat they are to themselves. They don't always use it because on a SWAT call out, like I said, we're there because the police need the police. So
okay. I think you already answered my next question. So moving on, dealing with intense responses to crisis is stressful and probably mentally taxing for responders themselves. Not only are you commander of the Crisis Negotiations Unit, but you are also involved in the Critical Incident Stress Management Team, or CISM, which responds to the emotional and psychological effects experienced by responders themselves following stressful responses and critical incidents. Is there a scheduled time for debriefing of officers to occur? And if there are scheduled debriefings in a time interval, is there a way for debriefing to occur after particularly stressful responses?
So the CISM team is available 24/7. And it's for employees, not just for officers.
That's great.
Yeah, it's we've really made some pretty cool improvements since I took over the team. So here's our SharePoint. It's kind of neat. I'll show you. So I have this is our calendar. So I have 2 personnel on call every week, 24/7.
Wow.
So let me see. We're right here, 24th. So they will go out 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, anytime any employee is involved in any one of these things. So aircraft, railroad, serious bus crashes, serious bodily injuries, anything really, really major. Officer involved shootings, anything really major. And then obviously anything that a supervisor out within JSO deems may be beneficial for their employee, they can call me or one of my team leaders and say, this is what I have, what do you think? So this is after a traumatic incident. I'll talk about peer support in a minute. We'll talk about officer-involved shooting because that's probably the biggest CISM thing we respond to. After an officer-involved shooting, or God forbid an officer is shot or killed, typically the zone commander, which would be my assistant chief, or the assistant chief of the zone, or if it's a SWAT, because we've had a SWAT guy that was shot not too long ago, last year, their assistant chief will say, we want to debrief. They'll call me and say, put it together. We like to do it within the next couple of days. You don't want it to fester among the employees, because the longer they're allowed to go home and just Monday morning quarterback what they did or didn't do, then they're gonna start second guessing. I should have done this. Why didn't I do that? If I had done that, so and so would have gotten hurt. If I had done that, why wasn't it me? Why, survivor guilt, all this kind of thing. So, so we set up a debrief with everybody involved, and it's mandatory unless you are excused by a director or a chief. I can't remember so much. And unless you have to be there if you are directly involved. So in other words, if the lieutenant was not there during the incident itself, during the gunshots, then the lieutenant is not to be at the debrief. Okay. And the reason for that is that a lot of guys aren't going to talk if your supervisor is there. So
makes sense.
If your sergeant was right there when the gunshot started, then your sergeant is going to be in that circle. And we do it in a circle because it's you don't do it in classroom, rows. We do it in a circle where we're all one big family. And usually, and we've gotten better, usually one typically veteran starts talking and then usually somebody else starts to talk. Now, we didn't used to do that. Used to be, nobody would say anything because the thought was if you said something, you couldn't show your feelings, your emotions, it would show weakness. And if you show weakness, then officers were afraid that, if you showed weakness, they would take your gun and they'd send you downtown and put you in teleserve, which is where you write reports over the phone. It's not like that, but that was the persona. So my team goes out, they affectionately refer to us as the Hug Squad. See if I have it. I know we're on recording, but we just updated our coin. So we go out, we extend the hands. There's on the other side too. We extend the hands of. We extend the hands to bring you through the crisis, and I have personnel on my team that are from every part of the agency. Sworn, which is the badge. Corrections, which is you see the jail cell. Communications, which is the radio tower, and civilian, which is unique. And we ensure that you don't walk alone through the crisis. So we have a pamphlet that we give you, which I don't have in here, it's in my car, but it has signs and symptoms that you may experience after a crisis. You may stop eating, you may eat too much. You may not sleep, you may sleep too much. You may go to the gym, you may not go to the gym, whereas you usually go to the gym. What we tell people is that all these are normal signs and symptoms that you could experience after a crisis. Your body is a machine. Everybody's machine works and handles crisis differently, trauma differently. I can't tell you how you're going to react to crisis. You have to figure it out when it happens. What we tell people is that whatever that is, try to remain as close to whatever your normal is as possible. If you go home after a shift and you drink a 6-pack of beer, then go home and drink a 6-pack of beer. If you don't, then don't start tonight after your incident. If you go home and you run a 5K, then go home tonight and run a 5K, you know. But if you don't, then don't. So if they don't hear that though, then they're gonna think, why am I not sleeping? Why am I not eating? Why am I eating too much? Why am I having nightmares? Why am I, So they need that. They need to hear that. They need to see it.
Yeah, for sure.
And what we also do is that we ask whether we can reach out to their spouse, their girlfriends, their boyfriends, their family. Sometimes they still live with their parents. When I came on the department at 24, I still lived at home before I bought my first house 2 years ago. So 2 years later. So we said, look, who better to see that whether Randi is normal, her normal, than those who are close to you. And I'll tell you another quick story. I was negotiating with a young lady who wound up killing herself on the phone with me. I heard the gunshot. And I remember the last words I said to her were, because my command said, all right, we talked to her for 4 hours. You gave her every reason to live. And she's just, running around. We caught her in a bunch of lies. So they said, you need to get a little bit forceful with her. So the last words she heard were, I'm tired of you dicking me around. And she pulled the trigger. And I lost it. I got all upset and heard her last breaths. And she has three girls. Well, she told me she had 3 girls. Afterwards, I thought I was okay. And I went home, and my now wife of 26 years almost, who was a dispatcher with us, she's been retired 7 now, almost 8, realized that I wasn't right. I didn't know that. I didn't realize it. But she realized I wasn't okay. And I wasn't a supervisor back then. So she made a phone call. And next thing I knew, I got called in and I got sent to EAP, in the Employee Assistance Program. And the sheriff, Rutherford, at the time, actually saw me at in-service training the next day, and he heard about the incident where the lady killed herself, and I was on the phone with her. And he asked if I was, how I was doing. So you don't know how your body is going to react. It's almost 28 years for me of seeing things that I can't unsee. And so it's a great transition here. So because this is a traumatic response, I said before I leave here, before I leave this agency, we're big enough, we have 3,000 employees, we should have a peer support unit. And those should be, and we do it, kind of do it subversively anyway. It's not organized because we talk to each other all the time, but we should have an outlet that we talk to each other about problems. So 5 of us last week, 2 weeks ago, took a peer support. It's taken over a year, but we took a peer support class. That's what all this is. We're starting a peer support team. So I trained the trainer course. So we're going to bring that. I have one of my team leader, one of my friends who's a negotiator, who's also a lieutenant, just got promoted with me this year. Is going to be the coordinator of the peer support team.
That's great.
So I said before I retire, I said one of my projects is that we need to start a peer support team because I've been to way too many funerals. Guys have killed themselves for whatever reason, and it shouldn't be that way. We should have an outlet where we can go to each other confidentially and safely and talk about any issues you have that are not trauma related. It may lead to trauma, but if I have an issue with 27 years of shit that I've dealt with on the street, but I haven't dealt with a trauma in years, and I'm okay with that. I don't it's not something new that I need to talk to somebody about right now, but I've got 27 years of just pictures and CPR on babies and death and destruction and car crashes and stuff like that. But I can go to Nikita and I can say, can we just go talk, So I'm honored that we're finally doing that.
That's great.
So anyway, I digress. But yeah, so we're doing some friggin' amazing things around here
That's so great
for
to
this
hear.
community and for the agency.
Mhm.
And by doing friggin' amazing things for the agency, it's going to make our employees that much better
Right.
to provide for the community.
That makes so
So,
much sense.
yeah.
So you did mention how there's like peer support now, and updated.
What's starting?
Yeah, what's starting, and also like debriefing. So are there different types and variations of CISM interventions that your team uses, such as like diffusing, which I saw was like a shorter, less formal version of debriefing, and like grief and loss sessions?
Yeah, so we don't do debriefings all the time. Debriefing is the big circle thing I talked about.
Yeah.
Diffusing is when the two people on call will go out. A call out, a CISM call out is a diffusing. We'll go out after, any one of these things happening. Let's say a major car crash involving a JSO employee.
Mhm.
We'll go out, we'll speak to the employee, and let's say, God forbid, they take a life in a car crash. We'll go out and we'll talk to them. That's a diffusing. It doesn't necessarily do a debriefing with everybody involved.
Mhm.
Excuse me, that's only if the hierarchy wants a debriefing with everybody. Debriefings only happen when it is a huge scene. That's very infrequently, maybe twice a year,
Mhm.
maybe. After the land, do you remember, you were young. The landing incident where those people shot, the landing a few years ago, we had a debriefing.
It sounds familiar, but
Yeah, we had that. We had a trailer fire a few years ago where the grandmother and a bunch of kids burned up. We had a debriefing after that. That's obviously traumatic. We had a debriefing last week. We had an officer that died. It was a heart condition, so it wasn't a traumatic incident per se, but it was traumatic.
Mhm.
Obviously, anytime you lose an officer is traumatic, but the assistant chief asked us to do a debriefing with his squad, so we went out for that. So it's not very often that we do a debriefing, but a diffusing, we've done, we've been, let's see, these are all the call outs this year. We've done probably close to, every year it goes up. We're probably close to 100 call outs this year.
Mhm.
Yeah. So there's 5 in that week alone. So it's just, yeah. So, but a diffusing is a call out.
Got it.
So
Yep.
that's the difference.
So you mentioned how sometimes you guys like use family members to help see if an officer is acting like different. But are there any resources provided to families of officers who have dealt with this stressful response to help them better support the officer, like directly?
So Health Advocate, which is I mentioned our external EAP, they are afforded the same opportunities, the same resources that our employees are.
Mm.
So they can get the same counselings, spouses, anybody that lives, dependents, anybody that lives in the home.
Mm.
So yes,
Okay.
yes, it's part of the package of being part of the family.
That's cool.
Yeah.
Okay, that's all I had. Thank you so
Awesome.
much for answering my questions. And is there anything else you'd like to add?
I don't think so. You have hit, I think,
You went super in depth, so.
you've hit every, I can't think of anything. You've, number one, you did your research.
Mm.
I am shocked at how how knowledgeable you were about CIT and CNU. So I don't know where you got your information from, but
The internet is
it's
a
scary.
wide resource.